The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Israel to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. I propose that the Council invite the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine to the United Nations to participate in the meeting in accordance with the Provisional Rules of Procedure and previous practice in this regard. There being no objection, it is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Mr. Ramiz Alakbarov, Deputy Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process and United Nations Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I give the floor to Mr. Ramiz Alakbarov. Our technical colleagues will allow the Council to hear you.
Can you hear me now, Mr. President?
Yes, we do. Please proceed and start again.
Thank you. Mr. President, Excellencies, today we meet at the moment of renewed hope, while progress on the ground is fragile and deep uncertainty persists. We must seize the opportunity before us to chart a better future for Palestinians, Israelis, and the wider region. Since coming into effect last month, the ceasefire has largely held in Gaza. However, recent airstrikes by Israel on populated areas have caused numerous casualties and significant destruction. Palestinian militants in Gaza have also continued sporadic attacks on Israeli soldiers, causing fatalities. This violence is jeopardizing the fragile ceasefire, and I urge all parties to exercise restraint and fulfill their commitments under the agreement. I recognize the commitments made thus far by the parties and the exceptional efforts of the mediators, Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and the United States, in sustaining the deal. The Security Council has also taken an important step in consolidation of the ceasefire with the adoption of the Security Council Resolution 2803. While still facing unbearable living conditions and seemingly insurmountable destruction, the people in Gaza have now experienced at least the first glimmers of respite from the near constant bombardment of the last 2 years. Families in Israel have been reunited with their loved ones who were held hostage by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups under intolerable conditions in Gaza. Other families have had the remains of their loved ones once returned and began the long process of mourning. But the bodies of 3 hostages have yet to be returned, with families waiting in agony for that day to come. The bodies of the deceased hostages must be returned immediately. Last week, I also met with the families of missing persons from Gaza. With tears in their eyes, they showed me pictures of their loved ones, who are presumed to be in detention or still buried under the rubble. All efforts must be made to identify missing Palestinians. These families also deserve closure. Mr. President, with the ceasefire largely holding, the United Nations has redoubled efforts to mobilize and scale up humanitarian assistance, seizing the moment to reach the population where they are. We must not risk a reversal. The coordinated international effort needs to be expanded, both in immediate terms to consolidate the ceasefire and over the longer term to realize a more secure and just future for all. Mr. President, the past weeks offered a measure of relief, and we acknowledge the increased volume of aid delivery into Gaza. And we also must confront the grim reality of the situation on the ground. The 2 years of fighting have left almost 80% of Gaza's 250,000 buildings damaged or destroyed. Over 1.7 million people remain displaced, mainly in overcrowded shelters without adequate access to water, medical care, and food supplies. Last week, I traveled to Gaza, where I met displaced communities and humanitarian personnel working tirelessly on the grounds to deliver assistance. The picture remained bleak. While the availability and price of basic food commodities has improved, key sources of protein such as chicken, meat, and egg remain out of reach for many families. The UN and its partners are still facing challenges in providing shelter materials such as tents and blankets. As we enter the winter months, these delays must be urgently resolved. There is a critical need to transition from emergency humanitarian assistance towards enabling communities to rebuild their lives and restore essential services. Hospitals continue to struggle without electricity and reliable water, severely limiting their ability to care for patients. The water and sanitation situation remains alarming. Sheikh Radwan Pond has effectively become an open sewage tank, requiring immediate attention to prevent a public health catastrophe. Key materials must be permitted to enter immediately to repair vital water and sanitation facilities. The rerouting of humanitarian and commercial movements through the Philadelphia Corridor and Al Rashid Coastal Road has complicated logistics, further delaying the distribution of much needed aid. Despite these hurdles and setbacks, the UN and its partners are working to scale up the response. An immunization campaign to reach 44,000 children has been launched, and hundreds of water wells have reopened. Over 24,000 metric tons of aid had been collected, yet 190,000 metric tons of food, medicine, and shelter are prepositioned in the region awaiting entry. I call on Israel to expand crossing capacity and expedite the clearance of supplies, including UN supplies. The opening of the Jordan corridor and the Rafah crossings are vital to further scale up the response, and the renewal of the NGO registration is essential and remains unresolved. UN is engaged with Civil Military Coordination Center, including its 22 partners, mostly from the member states, to coordinate the delivery of assistance and uphold humanitarian principles. These efforts have yielded benefits for Gaza population, including increased food supply and higher levels of approvals for shelter and non-food items, particularly for government-to-government aid. I also welcome today's news of the restoration of the fiber optic internet service provision in Gaza, a positive result of these efforts. Mr. President, the damage in Gaza, physically, economically, and socially, is catastrophic. We cannot address only immediate physical needs. Psychosocial needs, social cohesion, and justice must be addressed. There must be a restoration of dignity